Hello, my dear friends. This is Wild Kate. Thank you for being with me and subscribing to my stories. Let's go be a surrogate mom again. Come on, I could get a car. My story today is about a friend of mine who wanted to be a surrogate mom to make money to live a sheltered life. She got married believing that everything would be fine for them. Yeah, they don't have cool parents behind them. No one is going to buy them an apartment and a car. But they're young. They're not complaining about their health. They've got their whole lives ahead of them. She gave her all to her family. She worked and took any part-time job. She did all the housework, could make a meal out of nothing. She tried to live debt-free. So when she got her paycheck, she immediately paid the rent and utilities. She didn't even look at boutique windows. What was the point? You can compose, knit to the old coat, scarf, and bear it, and this 5-year-old clothes will play with new colors. But my husband needs sneakers. The 4th pair since their wedding day. Well, what can you do? That's how he wears shoes. And he needs new jeans. And at least 3 t-shirts. At first he, looking at the updates she brought, rejoiced, said thank you, then got used to it. Started to remind himself that it's time to change his closet. She did not notice how her husband, not just reminded, began to demand updates. She would have been glad. If he had a steady job and a stable income, even if it was modest, but without constant layoffs. They don't appreciate him there. They pay him a penny here. And such unpaid vacations of her husband for a year ran from 7 to 9. She loved him. And as they still say in our villages, love means pity. That's why she didn't say anything to him. And she would have kept silent. But in the 3rd year of their married life, she got pregnant. She told him about it, returning from the women's clinic with a card pregnant. That news kind of shook him up. And he stayed at the factory almost until the birth. Although he often said that it was not work, but hard labor. She gave birth to a boy. She gave birth easily, and the boy was nice and healthy. He wrinkled his nose when she fed him, just like her husband when he liked something. She was the happiest. But the happiness didn't last long. Her husband, knowing that there was a childbirth allowance, said he was quitting the factory. He'd look for something decent, and he stayed almost a year in her care. If only he'd helped her. He didn't. He'd only go out for an hour with the stroller. And in that time, she does the laundry, cleans up, and makes dinner. It's good that she had enough milk. She didn't have to spend money on formula feeding. But no one canceled the rent and utilities. And if it wasn't for her mom, who herself, after her husband left them, was spinning like a squirrel in a wheel. So if it wasn't for Mom, they wouldn't have survived. And so Mom sent parcels, albeit modest, and transferred money to the card. Mom saw that everything was hanging on her daughter. But she didn't interfere. She didn't want her daughter to remain a divorcee. In short, she didn't live, she made it work. I counted the days when the son will go to kindergarten and she to work. And then one day her husband, returning from another job search until evening, proposed an idea. What if she became a surrogate mother? He recognized she fits all the criteria. And above all, because she already has a child, which she gave birth to without complications and healthy. And surrogacy pays very good money. They could even buy an apartment. A small one, but their own. She didn't agree right away. She was tempted. But somehow it wasn't right. She would be carrying a child, and it didn't matter that it wasn't her own. Although why not her own if she would be inseparable from him for 9 whole months? Her husband ignored her arguments. He said that if he had the opportunity, he would do anything for his family. She didn't really believe in that would do anything anymore. But there was a little boy running around. He grew up knowing he had a mommy and a daddy. And it never occurred to her to ruin that. So she agreed. The contract was formalized in the presence of a lawyer and the head doctor with a couple after she passed all the tests. With the amount of money for surrogacy, she got the advance payment right away and immediately went to the bank. She insisted that this money should not be spent until the baby was born, and the rest of the sum was paid. And all for the sake of the apartment. Her husband realized that he would not change anything, and became even sensitive and attentive. Ahead loomed a full settlement and his own apartment. She, as in the first time, carried the child without complications, and easily gave birth to a girl, less weight and height than her own son. But the medics have their own measures. On the Apgar scale, the baby received the highest score. The happy parents settled accounts with her the next day. She felt fine, and again she had plenty of milk. But the girl was not brought to feed. That was the condition of the biological parents. She was crying quietly. She felt sorry for the little girl she would never see again, sorry for herself, deprived of this baby. When I came home, here was my son, here was the trouble of finding a suitable apartment, looking at these apartments. In short, it was as if the longing had passed, but only as if, because she involuntarily looked into the strollers in which mothers carried babies, hoping that perhaps she would see the girl she had given birth to. She had to change her job. Well, she could not explain that she had given birth to a child not herself, that actually sold it. She found a job. True, it started at 7 o'clock, and her son's kindergarten opened at 7 o'clock. But the headmistress went to meet a group of parents who also worked from 7:00. One teacher came at 6:30, and children. Early birds were under her care until their groups opened. The new job was good also that it was possible to take part of the second shift in work until 18:30. So she had time to take her son to kindergarten and pick him up. Her husband could have done it, but he was tired of looking for work, and he looked for it with enviable constancy, only more often than not with 0 results. But she was used to being the breadwinner. She remembered her mother's words that a divorced woman is not a woman. It wasn't long before her husband came up with the idea again. Let's be a surrogate mom again. She wanted to say that she still remembers that girl. She herself buys flowers on her birthday, congratulates her mentally. She believes with all her might that the girl is doing well. But where could she put the feeling that she was yours too? She wanted to tell him that, but she bit her tongue. He would not understand. If he understood, he would not come to her again with such a proposal. But her husband was already on fire. Buy a car. Head at least to the countryside, at least to the sea. Freedom. I've got my license from the army. I won't have to spend money on driving school. Well, and you, if you want, you'll learn. Theory at the driving school. And I'll help you with practice. And then, to make it more convincing, he called his son. Artyomka, do you want us to have our own car? Do you want to? Then ask Mom. And Artem bumped into her lap. Turning her face away from her son, she said, "Okay." And her husband immediately began to make plans. He'll find a suitable couple himself. He'll try to find out if they're solvent. And he'll decide on the price. This time they'll increase the amount. When he finds the right ones, they'll meet together. And satisfied, he went to watch TV. She bathed her son, put him to bed, and stayed sitting near him. I wanted to scream. Doesn't her husband realize what a torment it is to give up his child? No, he doesn't understand. And she again to change jobs. Well, she will not find the words to explain to people that like a storage room will be for someone else's child. And he's not a stranger, she knows that for a fact. She still has that girl in her soul. But this time she couldn't cross her husband. A couple of days later, her husband told her he'd found the right couple. They were almost the same age. They're wealthy. Both want a child, but they know the verdict. They can't have children. It's the wife's fault. The decision to use a surrogate is long-suffering, well-considered, and the candidacy of the woman who can help them is impeccable. The doctor confirmed that. He agreed to be the third party in the deal. The deal was a mutual agreement, without formalities. So cheaper, and the official fee due in such cases for officially signed papers, the doctor and the husband divided equally. But he didn't tell her about it. When she met the couple whose child she would carry, she couldn't help but notice how different they were. The husband, calm, tactful, respectful of interlocutors. And the wife, all in super fashionable clothes, capricious, then smiles insincerely, then just as insincerely lets tears. And her husband comforts her. Well, that's their business. And it's her business, if she gave her word, to bear a child. It's nobody's business what kind of heart she'll give it with. She signed up for it herself. The doctor did the familiar procedure for the second time. And successfully. A control check, and then ultrasound showed that 2 embryos are developing at once. Either will be twins. The future father frankly rejoiced. Stretch was the joy of his wife. As the surrogate mother managed to figure out, this young woman did not need a child so much less twins. In fact, she had doubts that she wanted a child. But in front of her husband, she seemed happy. And then the events developed according to some anti-scenario. The biological mom, when the pregnancy passed 6 months, set up a meeting with the surrogate. At a coffee shop, she showed up. She told her they'd decided to give up the baby. She'd leave part of the advance with the surrogate. But after the birth, they won't take the kids. They've changed their mind. So she can keep them at the hospital, or she could keep them. She didn't know what to say, although she suspected from the beginning that everything was not normal. But to give up her own children like that, she went home and told her husband everything. He was so angry. Sailed away, he saw him used foreign car, which was and on the move, and looks good. He started to argue, went to them to find out what was going on. Went out the next day first thing in the morning, but no one was home. The concierge said they'd gone on vacation to the islands. Doesn't know when they'll be back. My husband came home. What a scene. He was yelling and swearing with no choice of words. He was categorically against her giving birth to twins and touching the children. He said she should just write a letter of refusal. She didn't know what to do. Suddenly, she felt something wrong. She waited till morning. She called her mom. She came and found out what her daughter had agreed to, and that it was her husband's idea. It wasn't the first time. And that's when her mom didn't tell her to listen to her husband. She took her grandson and together they sent her to the hospital. There, having examined her, the doctor said that for more confidence in a safe delivery, she would have to stay in labor for the last month. Knowing that her mother would look after her son, she agreed. Her husband never even came to see her. Meanwhile, on the islands, where the biological parents of the twins were vacationing, there were events of their own. The future father, who didn't know that his wife had already given up his children without telling him a word about it, kept wanting to return home. According to his calculations, the surrogate mother was about to give birth. Well, twins could be a problem for her. Probably won't be without a C-section. The husband offered to cut his vacation short, but his wife just got into the taste. Every night in the bar, every day a new outfit, massages, cosmetic procedures, flirting right and left. Well, what's your hurry? The drunken wife flirted out. There will be no children. I already told the surrogate mother that we will not take them. Let her keep them for herself or in the maternity hospital. And anyway, if I have to, I'll give birth myself. And I would have given birth a long time ago. But why spoil your figure? Those words stunned him. and then pissed him off. Restraint and tact did not help. He made a real interrogation, and he learned a lot of new things. He found out that she had been taking a strong contraceptive all this time. Because, as she said, she didn't intend to spoil her figure by getting pregnant. Someday later, maybe. She confessed that long ago, from the first day of their marriage, made an acquaintance, and not for free, with the head doctor of the maternity hospital. That's why they diagnosed her with infertility. Maybe if he was not so persistent, did not say every day that he dreams of children, about 5 to 10 years later, she would have given birth herself. And she would have told him that medicine works wonders. But he stuck to her like a bath sheet. So she agreed, but not for twins. How she'd look with a huge double stroller. It's horrible. So her true colors were revealed. My husband immediately packed his things and went to the airport. He was lucky to find a ticket. And the next evening he was already in the hospital. He persuaded her to let him into the surrogate's room. When he entered, she turned away. She had no desire to talk to him. Talk about what? About the fact that her husband had left her because of her refusal to have future children. That she was left with a child and no job. That she'd been lying here for almost a month, not knowing what to do next. She did not know how to argue and scandalize. In this, she and the biological father of the twins were alike. Well, she didn't want to cry in pity. So she just turned away, making it clear that they had nothing to talk about. But he didn't see it that way, asked him to listen, and told him that his wife for several years deceived him, claiming that she was barren. But she herself, in collusion with the head doctor, all this time drank pills against pregnancy. That his wife agreed to surrogacy, afraid that she would be alone. He really wanted children. And although he was not going to divorce his infertile wife, but quite as his wife thought, could sooner or later take such a step. And this did not suit his wife. She did not want to be deprived of an idle and prosperous life. And then she had a plan, secretly from her husband, to negotiate with a surrogate mother that she, having given birth to twins, will write a waiver and leave the children in the maternity hospital, especially since there are no official papers on surrogacy. And it is his wife, having persuaded him to fly on vacation before the birth of children, herself, without his knowledge, met with the surrogate mother and announced the refusal of the future twins. He found out about it by accident when there, on the islands, once again offered his wife to fly home. He wanted to be with the children from the first minute of their appearance in the world. That's when, in a fit of anger, realizing that her plans are ruined, his wife, and blurted it all out. I know you're offended, but I give you my word of honor. All this was done behind my back. Now don't turn your back on me, don't drive me away, he asked the surrogate mother. And she believed him. He is just like her, hurt and deceived in this story. And he was no luckier with his wife than she was with her husband. Now he came to see her twice a day. And it was with him that she went into labor. She bit her lip, embarrassed to moan in pain. But he understood. He dared to stroke her hair, saying in a trembling voice, "It's gonna be okay." And she believed it too. She gave birth to twins by herself. Everything was ready for a C-section, but she asked to be allowed to give birth on her own. The doctors consulted and said yes. If anything went wrong, they would be there for her. This time the labor lasted a long time. The twins, and they were 2 girls, set the line of who would be the first to enter the world. And both, with a small interval, came into the world. Here she couldn't help herself. She moaned and screamed a couple of times. And he, dressed in sterile clothes, was there all the time, holding her hand. She knew for sure that he had helped her. In the evening, he came to her so happy. It turned out that he had already seen his daughters. He was allowed to look at them in the pediatric ward. He told her thank you. with such excitement and gratitude that she had no shadow of doubt. Yes, this is the father. A real one, a happy one, and she was happy for the babies. She was being prepared for discharge. And the girls, of course. And then he came in again with his face all messed up. I'm so afraid of doing something wrong, of hurting my daughters. First of all, we should probably find a nanny. And a nurse would be good. I seen, you might say, peeped as you fed them. And I'm not sure that even after finding a nurse, the little ones will retain their appetite. I'm afraid to ask you, but I'm asking you. Would you agree to live with us? She was taken aback. How? In what capacity? But she said something else. I also have a son, Artemka. He will soon be 6 years old. Now he is with my mother in another city, and I miss him so much. So let Artem and your mom live with us. My ex-wife is being divorced by my lawyers. She won't come to my house again. And you can take your husband. In addition to my city apartment, I have a large cottage 5 kilometers from the city. There's plenty of room for everyone. And daughters will be good with you, he said. When she heard about her husband, she perked up. I'll divorce my husband too. You know, he invented this kind of income. And when he heard that your wife, refuses to give up the children, he also said that they do not need them, and I can even throw them away. I have already decided that if so, the girls will never leave. I myself will raise. Well, and if we with my son and my mother will not be a burden to you, I agree. Just help me with the divorce, if you have your own lawyers. I don't want to see my ex-boyfriend anymore. No problem. Give me the marriage certificate. Then you'll sign the petition that the lawyer will draw up. And you don't need to go to court. They'll divorce you without your presence. I promise you that. Now here's something else. Call your mom, let her and Artyom gather. I'll go get them myself. That's how it was resolved. When she and the twins arrived at the beautiful and spacious house, she was met by Artyom and her mother. Her son, having hugged and kissed her, immediately began to look at the girls and said, "What beautiful sisters I have, and what are their names?" The adults, hiding embarrassment, replied in unison that the girls do not have names yet. Tama, what would you call them? Artem, becoming important from such a proposal, replied, "We need to see to whom what name suits." For almost a week, the little girls lived nameless. She distinguished the girls at once, and Artem somehow saw who was where. Then their mother began to distinguish them. Only their father didn't know which girl was which. Then he couldn't stand it. He called Artem to the porch and asked him, "How do you distinguish them, Temek? Teach me." "Easily," proudly replied Artem. "Look, Polinka smiles more with the right corner of the lips, and Alinka, the left." "Oh, brother," he rejoiced. "So you have already thought of names. Beautiful. I like them. But let's ask Mom. You grown-ups are weird. Mom says we should ask you. What's there to ask? Here's Alinka, and here's Polinka." He was afraid to be openly happy about how his big house was now. Here the main thing was care. First of all, about the girls and Artem. Then for each of the adults. The care was visible even in the way the flowers were watered and the alpine slide was taken care of. They had received a second birth. Now no one was embarrassed when Artem called the girls sisters. It was perceived as so and so. But still over the adults hung the question, who are they to each other? From a strong married couple, they were separated only by different bedrooms. This boundary they did not cross. Although every day it became more and more difficult to hide their affection for each other. 5 asterisk asterisk asterisk. But everyone had bitter experience and disappointment behind them. That's why they didn't rush things. But the denouement was inevitable. They got married. and immediately became a family of many children, where the eldest son was always ready to protect Alenka and Palenka, where the grandmother was respected, and the parents themselves could finally not hide that they were happy. And about this somehow found out those who for so long spoiled their lives in previous marriages. The first to come begging for forgiveness was her ex-wife, who had given up her children. She was politely escorted to the gate and warned that her next visit might end with the police. Then the ex-husband came to confess, and for the first time, she did not feel even pity for him. She imagined how he insisted on at least throwing away these crumbs and simply did not want to see him. So Artem could not remember that it was his own father, too few good memories he left. With the easy hand of grandmother, they began to call their cottage. And growing up, Palenka and Alenka diligently listed who lived in the cottage and tried not to miss anyone. They loved everyone. Well, is there any other indicator of a happy family?